Hi, everybody. Welcome to our Unwind Live virtual event series. I'm John Cohn from KPCC and LAist. Today, we're delighted to have NPR science reporter and Invisibilia co founder Lulu Miller in conversation with Erica Williams Simon, an entrepreneur, author, and former head of Snapchat Creators Lab. And we have more events to come. Our No Panic Guide live series continues tomorrow with David Wagner and Lori Levy from California's EDD in a live Q&A. So bring your questions or submit them ahead of time. More info on all of our events at kpcc.org/in-person, where you can also sign up for our newsletter and follow us, KPCC and LAist, on social media for updates. If you're in a position in which you can support KPCC and LAist, we're always grateful for anything you can do. Links to all these points of connection are in the comments section, but without further ado, Erica Williams Simon and Lulu Miller.
Thank you so much, John, and the whole KPCC LAist family. And thank you all for joining today. This is going to be a fun conversation. Hi, Lulu.
Hello.
I'm so excited. So John introduced me with some titles and things I've done, Snapchat, entrepreneur, all these things. But if you know me, which I'm going to treat you all like you do now, we're all friends. The best way to describe me is that I'm Tommy and Debbie's daughter. Because my parents started our church in our basement when I was 9 months old. I'm a preacher's kid through and through. And I share that as an introduction because that upbringing and that foundation really has been the center focus of my work, not necessarily within the faith community. Again, I've worked in politics and media and tech and all these places, but what we did in those four walls every week was, to me, create space and conversation to ask the big questions about who we are and how we want to live, and use the power of story to help us discover and answer some of those questions. And so that's why I'm so excited to talk to Lulu today. You all may know her as John said, as a brilliant science reporter and storyteller, and the founder of and creator of Invisibilia, former host but contributing editor there. You also should know her as the author of a beautiful, beautiful new book. Lulu, hold it up. It's called Why Fish Don't Exist, a story of loss, love, and the hidden order of life. So that is how you all should know Lulu. But if you read her work, you will also know that, like me, she is the daughter of a strongly opinionated man, but who could not be, I think, more different than my father, in that he was an atheist and a scientist. And we'll talk about that, and you talk about that a lot in your book. But somehow we have both found ourselves in this space where what we do is ask big questions about life, and in particular, try to make meaning out of chaos, which I think is one of the core threads and themes of your book. So Lulu, I'm excited to talk to you today.
Me too. When you were describing that, I was like, I was in the polar opposite basement, but it had the same result of like pounding that there was still a love of curiosity and wonder, almost from a religious place and a passionate amount. But it was just that particular religion was dogmatic atheism.
Yes. I mean, it's so funny because when I started reading your book, so my book came out last year, wildly different book, right? It's very like about finding your calling and your, mission in life and all this stuff. But it starts with a story about my father. And what ended up being, he didn't realize it was going to be his last words. He passed away at the age of 42 in the pulpit preaching. But he was giving this sermon about life and new life and the potentiality and possibility of it and meaning. And I thought it was so interesting that very early on in your book, you start with a story. You share a story about a very meaningful, formative exchange with your father, where he also talks about life and the meaning. Tell me about that, because it's very different.
Yeah, well, so yeah, I was about 7, and we were standing on the deck of our house, which is in Cape Cod, and we were looking out over this marsh. And actually, I do think this was partly influenced by growing up in the 80s. And there were like all these ads for the Church of Latter-day Saints and they were great ads. Like whoever is the marketer behind that is a person with some help. But there would be some like funny little mishap, like the milk would spill, and then there'd be this coming together. And then it would say, join the Church of Latter-day Saints and discover the purpose of life. And I started, I think, believing that the purpose or the meaning of life was like this fortune that would just be spat out if you asked the right person, that there was an answer. And then I finally, just that morning, we were looking out at the horizon, and it was just literally the space of like, the marsh goes to the ocean, goes to the sky, and what happens at that line? And oh, what are we doing here? And what are the stars? And how am I related to the duck and the reeds? And it just, like, the existential question came up, and I said, "Hey, Dad, what's the meaning of life?" And he like put down his binoculars. I still remember this very clearly. And he kind of raised an eyebrow, and he was like, "Nothing." And then he went on this like dazzling rant with a lot of glee in his voice about how there was no meaning and no purpose and no point, and don't let anyone tell you there is.
And you were
Um,
7, right?
7, like, I don't know exactly, but around 7, very young. And it just was this like befuddling moment for me that I think it on one hand, he's a really joyful person and he's a very connected person. And so I thought, okay, if I accept that, then maybe I end up like him.
Mm.
But then some days that wasn't always as easy to get to the marvel part of that. But yeah, that was a huge moment.
How do you think that foundation led you to the point where you're writing this book, right? I don't want to give away too much of the story, but I think just for the sake of everyone watching and listening right now, talk to us about where you were when you decided to write this book, and how you got there.
Yeah. So, I mean, I was at a place, and I do have to just say, like, your podcast, The Call, is so awesome.
Oh,
It,
thank
and
you.
just so people know this, if they haven't had the luck of coming across it, like, you find these amazing women who are just, it's a treat to listen to them. And then it's also such a treat to see who you care about. Your curation is really neat. But you take on these questions of calling, which I think it is different than ambition. It is different than talent. There's a difference between what you can do and what you want to do. And you like, I have found it as a woman trying to move forward in the world, like a very helpful, just to hear all the tricks that people have. And you watch people deviate off a path and fall into a moment of utter doubt. And so I bring that up, just because you should all listen. Like, you can even leave that. Just go listen. But no, stay here. But but I was in one of those moments. Like, I was really lost. I was in my late 20s, and I had worked as a science reporter for about 5 years. I had this dream job at Radiolab that I was already insanely lucky to have got, but I left it in part because I felt uncomfortable in certain ways in journalism. Like, I always wondered, do I have the backbone? Do I have the courage for this profession? Like, I would get so scared before interviews, and like, really anxious. And then I would get so anxious after interviews where I'm making all the editorial decisions and what I'm cutting out. And I just was like, maybe I'm too much of a stress case for this profession.
Right,
And I left to go study fiction writing. So I always knew I loved storytelling, and I'd had this childhood fantasy of like writing novels and basically living in my imagination where I
right.
don't have to interfere with anybody's life, but where I can find magic.
Right.
So I was doing that, and in the process messed up a 7-year long relationship. And so I was in this new town. I didn't have a community. I was working on something that I was not good at. I would turn in my stories, and like, it was just clear I was not good at writing short stories. Uh and I just lost this person who was so dear to me, and I wanted him back at that point. And I was just like, the question of calling actually came up to me. I was like, the book actually stemmed out of a very authentic question of, when does persistence turn to madness?
Mhm.
And is there any way to know if you're following your heart, pining for a person who doesn't want you back, writing these stories that don't appear to be very good? Like, is there a moment where you know that that persistence is actually like leading you off the plank into insanity?
Yep.
And do you at a certain point actually need to like, for as beautiful as it is to listen to a calling, do you actually at a certain point need to listen to the world saying, maybe try a different thing?
You say it in the book.
How do you know?
You said that you're on a journey to figure out what becomes of you when you refuse to surrender to chaos.
Yeah. Yeah. And that, I think, like, gr- that I had an intuitive sense that that's dangerous.
Mhm.
That like, there's something almost like that, it's a cautionary tale, that there's hubris involved in refusing to back down from chaos, and refusing to admit the signs that what you're doing is not going to work out. Like, I had a sense that that was a path toward humiliation, delusion, evil. Like there was something in me that, but I also wondered, like in a moment where there was actually nothing else I could hold on to but my faith in these things.
Yeah.
Um, and so I almost wanted permission. And so this is where the weird, like this book was never meant to be. I thought this was going to be an essay. I thought this was going to be a Google search. Like,
that's what I was going to say. Now tell the people how we get from these philosophical questions to fish.
So basically, I had heard this anecdote about this brazen scientist from the 1800s. His name was David Starr Jordan, whose life, he was a fish collector, he was a taxonomist, trying to figure out how everything is related on the tree of life. And his work was just freakishly plagued by chaos. So his first collection took him about 20 years to make, was struck by lightning and burned to the ground. It takes him almost another 30 years, but he keeps going. And that collection comes down in the 1906 earthquake.
Yeah.
And at that point, instead of giving up, he invents this like silly technique that he believes will protect his work against future destruction. And so he just keeps going. And I'd heard this little anecdote about how he started sewing names to the fish themselves to keep man's knowledge tied on. And I just wondered, like, there's just what became of that guy? Like, what becomes of the person who refuses to accept that chaos will break his order? And did he end up, happy and successful? Did he end up a fool and reviled? And I literally wanted to read him like a parable.
Yeah.
And
And so that, in some ways, that's what you did, right? You went on this journey to uncover his life, and at the same time, because the book is both history in chronicling his journey, but also part memoir, because you're also asking these questions of yourself based on where you were, which we just talked about.
Yeah.
But here's something interesting. So you just brought in the word order.
Yeah.
Which I don't think we've used thus far in the conversation. We've talked about purpose and calling and chaos. When I, not a scientist and not thinking from a science brain, when I hear chaos, I don't automatically associate that as the opposite of order. I know that it is, right? But when,
yeah,
it's just not the way my brain works. I hear chaos, and then I think, okay, I need certainty and structure, and those two things can go hand in hand. But there's something interesting about the story that you were chronicling and tracking in this book, because his job was to create order in some way. It was to label and identify and figure out structure. And did you find that refreshing where you were in your life? Did you find that there was something that you appreciate about a need for order? Does that help you? What did you discover?
Yeah, I mean, I think what initially called to me about it is like, it felt like the most primal human impulse, just naked. It felt like this just naked metaphor for what we're all trying to do, is just make order in a world ruled by chaos. And it helps, like, we have to. If we don't do that, how do we distinguish poison from herb? Like, it's the most basic, crucial part of survival. And yet we are so impotent in the face of the world in which we live. And so, like, I think I saw in him just this naked sort of, like the will of humans, like what we're all trying to do. Just, and I think, I think that in certain ways, what I found is both, that I think, like, I guess, I don't know. I don't think I found an easy lesson. Like, I identified with it for sure. It's what I was trying to do. It's what I'm trying to do as a journalist and a storyteller, like, all the time, is go out and talk to people and find some meaning and find some order. How did you climb your way out of hurt? How did you get through this broken relationship? How do you like just live in this world? And so I think it's a really natural human impulse. And I identified with him throughout a lot of it, but that became, as his story progressed, a little bit scary, I guess. What I'd say, like, I totally identified with him. In a certain way, like, there was this one moment where I was so lost in my life, and the thing that was giving me purpose was researching his life. And he was like, on part of my head was like, he's this ridiculously obsessive collector, so obsessive. And I was going into the archives for like the 9th time at the Field Museum. I was in Chicago for a little bit, and I kept going into this rare books room and requesting these rare documents on ichthyological collection practices. And the first 2 days, the archivists were like, "Oh, it's so great you're here. Like, you're interested." And then by like day 5, they were concerned about my mental health. They were like,
You were him.
and so
Right.
it was not lost on me that I was obsessively researching and obsessive, like
Right.
resonances. I identified with him in certain ways.
So here's what I also think is fascinating about the story where it takes a turn. So we've talked about this desire to create order. What drew you to him initially was this sense of dogged persistence. Like, I will not, right? I will not fail. I will keep going until my last breath. Nothing, chaos will not win.
Yeah.
Which I think certainly in a Western world, we in some ways idolize that mentality. Even from a faith standpoint, right? This idea of perpetual hope and persistence and never give up. That is so beautiful and inspiring. And so we kind of label people like that as good. That's what we want to be like. So I would imagine you were surprised when his story took a turn. And I don't want to reveal too much, guys. You have to read this book. It's so fascinating. But he's not really a great guy.
Yeah.
Like, and that's an understatement. That's putting it lightly.
No, absolutely. I mean, I think it's right. Like, we romanticize faith and persistence through doubt. Like that is the makeup of almost every hero. And I
Yeah.
think one of the things I found in his story, and then that I sort of broadened, there's sort of a chapter where I just look at, well, what do psychologists have to say about, small amounts of self-delusion?
Yeah.
And, this is probably something likely you've all heard, that actually a small amount of self-delusion correlates with success and with mental health. And that actually, you are more likely to achieve your goals if you walk around slightly deluded about your abilities and with a slightly rosy sense of yourself. And so, I mean, on one hand, I thought, okay, well, that's helpful information. Like, it has been measured. I will be more likely to achieve my goals if I totally lie to myself and I don't worry too much about all the failure, rejection, and utter disinterest.
That sounds great.
But I think, the thing to consider is, well, what about other people's goals? And you might be more likely to achieve your goals, but what effect does that have on the world around you? And does that matter? And I
Mm-hmm.
think that is what I really kind of examine in the last part of the book, of just, is being able to achieve your goals all that matters? And what do we do with this strange power? Like, if it makes us better, if this kind of persistence, like, what do we do with that choice, that yes, that bullheaded persistence will help us, but that it really may hurt other people? And I think, in a way, where I have come to, or what I've been thinking about lately, is that there are such better things that exist outside of your goals. Actually, like, the human mind is so small in what it can come up to think of, to dream for, or to want.
Yeah.
And that actually there can be more flavorful, insane, surprising gifts awaiting if you actually let go of that tunnel vision.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's an easy answer. Like, I think sometimes, to create social change, like, all bulldozing isn't bad. Like, he
Right.
used his bulldozing eventually for bad. Um, but sometimes you do just need to tunnel in. And so I think there's sort of like, it has to involve some reality testing of
Yeah.
to what end.
And I think there's a balance, or at least I found in my life that there's a balance. First of all, I think maturity has helped me let go of some of the kind of dogged determination to achieve goal X, Y, or Z, right? Because
Yeah.
life happens. And also you realize at some point that like you said, there's only but so much the human brain, based on its capacity, but also your life experiences, there's only but so much you even know about what you want or what's possible. So what I found is that there's a healthy distinction to make between pushing forward towards a goal and valuing certain ideals. The idea that I want a life that feels a certain way rather than prescribing what that has to look like. Or I want a life that has a particular impact on the world, but I have no attachment to how I achieve that, or kind of, and that's how I wrestle with it. But like you said, there's no real answer or solution.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that you're sort of already hinting at, that's a beautiful distinction. That's sort of like, mistrust the end goal, but trust the craving or the feeling and be open to how it manifests. But okay, so it's like, as someone who thinks about calling,
Yeah.
like, do you ever think that calling can really lead you astray, that you have that your work is to give up on it sometimes?
I think that your work, so in my opinion, is that our work sometimes is absolutely giving up on a vision, because our vision is limited. And as we grow and as we change, the vision changes. And we can then look back with clarity and see in hindsight, like, that wasn't even the right vision for me. I didn't know what I didn't know. But I believe that there's something deeper that is a sense of calling, that is calling you towards a particular reality, or towards, like I said, a particular ideal or a particular sense of values, a particular, I don't know, manifestation in the world. I can't give up on that.
Yeah.
I just, and that for me, it's because I don't know. And I think this is also probably a very human craving, because if I let go of that, even acknowledging that part of my calling is to live in a sense of wonder and awe. Part of my calling is to let go of certainty, right? I think oftentimes we need to redefine what we believe is calling. It doesn't necessarily mean you know what it all gonna look like.
Yeah.
But so then that's my question back to you. So you know, not just in this book, I mean, just over the course of your life, and even going all the way back to your father, like, you have this tremendous foundation of reason.
Yes. Yeah. I thought you were gonna be like, of meaninglessness.
No,
Yes, and reason. Yes, right.
yeah.
Reason. Yeah.
Because I should also be clear, I don't believe that faith and science have to always be at odds with
Oh
one another.
no, me neither. Me neither.
I just want to say it for folks who are watching, because sometimes it gets portrayed that way.
Yeah.
But you have this tremendous foundation of reason, and that, yes, you have a curiosity, but your curiosity, in some ways, at least my understanding of science, is that it's because you believe that there is an answer that should be found. Right? Is that true?
Yeah. Oh no, for sure. I mean, I think that that's something, as I get older, I am loosening the grips on. But yeah, no, that's what formed me, and certainly part of the book, writing the book, has been to in no way say science isn't real at all, but to like take my reverence down a tiny notch. So yes, like, I am born as, okay, I'm like a scientist's daughter, married to a scientist, I'm a science reporter. I love science. Like, I do find the meaning there.
Yeah.
And I believe in it and its power. I think what I've come to realize is just how subjective it is. Like, how every question a study asks is designed by a human. Like, it is in certain ways, it has just as subjective as it is, as just as subjective as art. Like, I really think, measures, especially measures of human worth or intelligence, those kinds of things are so blurry, and we have to, like, be really wary about how much we trust the results a study is spitting out, because that feels dangerous to me. And even the word order, like, that comes from the word, the old Latin word for a loom, for the way that threads sit together in an orderly fashion on a loom. And then it was extended to mean how people stand together in a orderly fashion beneath a king or like an army general. And it was only extended to nature in the 1700s. It was a superimposition. It was a guess that there is an order to find there. And that just, it makes me think, like, order is just a superimposition to keep things in line, and we have to be really wary of the things trapped underneath that order. And so yeah, so like, I think a lot of what drives me, honestly, is to maybe it does come from that conversation with my dad, where he is still with us, and I feel so grateful for that. But a lot of the stories I've done are like trying to show him back that there is meaning and magic by his rules, made of the particles of this world, by science. But I think, yeah, that, like, you kind of put your finger on it, that maybe it's showing a little bit of the sort of like numinous within the science, and that isn't just always a hard answer. And it's really fun to talk to scientists about spirituality and the bigger questions.
So Krista Tippett, who I absolutely love, has done like my secret goal. Although it's not a secret now because I'm telling the world.
Bring it.
My desire is to be like the Black millennial Krista Tippett. Like I eventually want to do like
you are well on your way.
That's my goal. That's
not far.
But for that very reason, that it's so fascinating to have those conversations with people that we don't think are having those conversations, or we think that their language means that there's no belief system, or that and it's actually the opposite in some ways, that there is so much wonder and awe and mystery embedded in science, and on the flip of that, even within faith and religion and spirituality, we are all constantly trying to create some sense of order there as well. But anyway, okay, so let's pull back from the existential and the philosophical, because
sorry.
No. I could do this all day.
It's the Wednesday Unwind. They I don't know. They need
to wrap the big question.
We're gonna change it up.
But to make it practical, and you kind of asked me this a little bit, like, so how do you deal with this? How do you then take these ideas and live your life? But so you were at this point where you're like, okay, I've had this terrible breakup. Truly, the subtitle of the book is a story of loss, love, and the hidden order of life. So there are these very real, concrete life realities that you were dealing with, still have to deal with. How do you take these larger lessons and themes about chaos and order and calling and meaning and make decisions? Like, okay, tomorrow, what am I going to do with my day? What is my job? Who do I marry? How do you think about that in relation to decision making?
I mean, the thing I've been really thinking about a lot lately is, and we were talking about this a little bit the other day, and you were hinting at it, is just like, as uncomfortable as it is to embrace uncertainty and to know that actually the path of honoring the uncertainty, exploring the uncertainty, like that is the path to truth. I think it's really important in journalism, like have your hunch, feel it, and then ignore it and test it and bring in other people. I think it's the path to, honestly, like warming the cold heart that can be the human existence. Like the more uncertain you are about just simple things like who at a party is going to be interesting to talk to, or what you think is going to be a kind of job or task at your job that you're going to like just opening your brain a little bit from this sense that you have it all figured out and that you know what you want and that you know how things work. It's not always easy. Like, it's so easy to say that, but man, it's like way easier to cling to certainty, Yeah. But I think when we can let go and inhabit that space and ask questions and like bring other people into our process, I think that actually in some of your interviews, like you talk a lot about this idea of counsel and to me, that's about leaving the certainty of your head and bringing in more people into the conversation of the choices you're making with your life and not being afraid of that.
Yeah.
And so that's like how I think about it practically in almost everything, in interviews, in what I'm going to eat for dinner, like, and, ultimately, just who I've married and how that looked different than what I thought was like my form of a mate. Originally thought it was like a tall man and actually it's a short woman. Like it just and just being open to like you might not know what you need for yourself and investigate and stay alert. And that to me is the path to like a much wilder existence. Like and it just adventure. Yeah, exactly. So that's how I think about it practically. And it's not always easy to do. Like that's the thing, is just uncertainty is really scary. We're all in it. Like I can't right now, like I like the short, I'm like, okay, isolation till May. I prefer the dashing my hopes. Like I don't want to know that if it's gonna be till August. Like, and then the second wave, like I'm still hoping it'll just end.
It'll be better soon. Yeah.
Like, and
there couldn't be a more, and of course you didn't know that when you wrote the book and when your publisher decided when the book was coming out, but there couldn't be I was just recommending it to someone today, and I was saying, like, yes, it's a science, and it's fish, and it's history. It's
I know. Yes, I know.
And I'm saying that for some people that already really excites them. For those who it doesn't, trust me, it is so much more than that. And it's so appropriate for the moment that we're in, because whether you want it or not, we are in chaos.
Yeah.
We are in uncertainty. And so trying to find, there's also a really important distinction that I just realized as I was saying it. There's a difference between meaning and answers.
Yeah.
And I think people often get those two things confused. Like, I don't have the answers for what's happening. No one does. No one really has the answers for how to fix the thing, how to get us out of the thing, what's happening next. But you can make meaning, and you can find meaning amidst the chaos right in this moment.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that's like, if my pitch for anything for the book is like, I know it's like so many people are like, this title, I just can't with you. But it is a story. Like, at the end of the day, like, stories have, it's just a story. It's a story of a guy that has some, in my opinion, like, I wanted it to read like a thriller. Like, it has twists and turns. I throw a little of myself in there. There are some big questions, but they're all rooted in narrative. And for me, like, that's why I fell in love with radio. There are certain stories that felt like beacons. This is the only way I can describe it, as a lighthouse, like when you're drowning and you're lost and someone says something in a story form that's so different than what you're going through, but just gives you a sense of, someone else has gone through it, or a new take. And that's like, it's like when you were talking about order. On one hand, I hate myself and I feel dirty about the desire to make, or like to find story, because that can go wrong and that can oversimplify things. But I also don't know if I could ever stop, like, if I wanted to, because I need that, like, they just, yeah. So that's ultimately, more than anything, I just hope it's like a good story.
I love it. It's such a good story. Okay, so I'm starting now to take questions.
Oh yeah, questions.
I got a quick note that at the start of the event, there were apparently some technical difficulties.
Okay.
So there will be, after the event, a clean audio and video capture that'll be available shortly. And so folks can go back if they missed anything at the top. You can go back and rewatch, because it's a nice, beautiful audio and video record. But okay, so someone asked this question, which is a lovely kind of follow up to what we just talked about. We were talking about these big ideas and said, so practically, how do you make decisions? Practically, how do you make choices in your life? This question is, so what are you doing with your days right now? In the middle of all this chaos, like, how are you spending your time?
I mean, well, we should both answer.
Okay.
Do you want to go first?
Nope.
Okay. It's been a weird, so the book came out a week ago. So this is some time I took off from work to go on book tour, which I'm not traveling very far for. The whole thing was canceled. So I've been, honestly, like, it's been weird. I mean, I've been doing a ton of interviews about myself alone in my closet.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm like, here we go. And it feels almost Truman Show, where I'm like, Emma? So it is such a gift. Like, man, it is such a gift to have people read your work and ask questions. Like, that is just, I feel so lucky to be at this moment, but it is also like tinged with an amount of loony bin of just like, I'm alone. And so I've been spending a lot of time doing that. And honestly, like, just from the, the standpoint of getting the word out about a book when you can't go on tour, the publisher has been like, oh, do you have any essays you could write that like feel tangential? So I'm working on a couple that we'll see if they go anywhere, but feel sort of related to the moment and sort of not. So I'm like writing and talking about myself.
Great way to spend your time.
And like going on runs in the places it's allowed, and hanging out with my toddler, and that's what I'm doing.
Yeah. What am I doing? It's interesting. So I've been socially isolated now for 44 days. I came back from an event in New York and immediately was like, I was in New York. I'm never leaving my house again. It's been a minute, and it's been very interesting. So I've been fortunate that a lot of my work has been able to shift digitally. So I'm still hosting virtual convenings. I've become an expert in Zoom. I'm working on a big project right now that is tracking narratives around class and poverty for a foundation. And we didn't know when we started it that this was going to be happening. And so it's actually ramped up the work. But it's also been so weird because I get my energy from talking to people and being literally in physical space with them. I mean, even my podcast, like the first 3 seasons of the podcast, I refused to do an interview or wasn't actually in person. There's just something magical about that. So it's actually been really hard for me, just being home and not being out with people. But I've been doing them. I've been on Zoom. I've been doing these great conversations. Half that and being very busy, and then crashing and saying like, I don't want to do anything but eat and watch Netflix. And so I've been doing that too.
Yeah. Some Netflix has been watched here too.
Oh my gosh, so much. This is a great question. Thank you to whoever asked this. If David Starr Jordan was still alive and you could ask him anything now, what would that be? And what do you think he would think of this book? It's a great question.
He would have some issues with this book. So okay. I think I would ask him. So I don't think this gives too much away, but he was involved in the eugenics movement in a pretty particular way. That's what I'll say to keep you a little bit of suspense. And what I really wonder is if he had regret about that. Because the tides were starting to change by the time he died, and he didn't openly write about having any remorse. He really believed this was how to cure suffering in society and reduce pain and crime, and it was so misguided. But I wonder, though he doesn't write about it, I wonder if he had doubt or remorse. That is my big question. Like, I don't understand how he went to the grave, and all I can see is what he wrote. So that's my big question for him. And what would he think about the book? I mean, he would. So at one point, I call him like the Rumpelstiltskin of the Dis, because he can take. And I mean, he is he can take any criticism or diss and turn it into a compliment about him. So like he wants, like it's like the backdoor brag on steroids. I mean, he was good at omitting anything negative about himself, as we all are to some degree, but his was really impressive. So I show some of his darker sides, and I think he would be uncomfortable with that. But I would hope he would think it's fair and that it's honest. But I don't think he would like to look in the mirror of the book.
Right. Would you ever want, this is my question, and I'll go back to the audience questions in a second, but that made me think, would you ever want someone to write your story?
Oh, heck no.
Right? my first thought was, I don't want anyone to write about me.
And I get that. Like, and that's why I don't want to even offend the Zoom audience with showing what my cuticles look like, but they're a mess. And like, the reason why is because I get that. Like, in every story I tell as a journalist, like, I am trying so hard to show nuances and show complexity. But with every edit, I'm reducing some, like, I love it. And yet I get that it's in certain ways, like a violent, uncomfortable process for the person that it's being done to. So heck no.
Right. It's funny. You use the word reduce. You talk about that a little bit in the book too, right? Like the idea of categorization is automatically, anytime you have to classify something or someone, it reduces it and kind of cuts off the possibilities of the things that are outside of what fit in the box.
There's this beautiful, one of the like biggest learning experiences for me in this journey. There's this woman, Anna, who was impacted by the eugenics laws that David Starr Jordan helped to put in place. She's alive today. She was sterilized based on this idea that she was quote unquote unfit, undeserving to live, hurting society in some way by existing. And I was explaining to her some of the more philosophical ideas of the book, this concept that fish might not exist and might not be a sound category. And she was saying, that reminds me of the word unfit, similar letters, similar length. And she said, I think the danger is that when you name something, as she was named unfit, you run the risk of stopping to look at it. You name it and then you don't see it anymore. And I was just like,
that's mind-blowing.
And this is from somebody who's written off as intellectually disabled and therefore not bringing enough intelligence, whatever abstract BS-y concept that is, And like she has so much more wisdom than almost anyone I talk to in the book. And like if that's not intelligence, like I just these are the measures I'm talking about. And she had that through experience from being disregarded for 15 years, like literally just cut off from society, basically interred. And she knows what that means. Like what a powerful idea. um
Brilliant. That's so brilliant.
yeah.
Let's see. What else did we get? Oh, okay. Can you describe your? Oh, for both of us. Okay. So maybe
I like the boat. I really like that. Let's you don't
I
have to
made you go first last time. It was, can you describe your writing routines? How do you stay on track? Well, chaos. That would be the word I would use to describe mine. It's funny. It's taking me a very long time. I mean, my book has been out a year, and prior to that, I was an op-ed writer, periodic. I'd never called myself a writer. I'm still deeply uncomfortable calling myself a writer. Writing is a thing I can do and do in some instances to communicate something, but I've never felt like a real writer. And that's not self-deprecation. I think it's because I always assumed, do you love writing? Like, do you feel like it's something you have to do?
It depends on the moment or the day. Like I feel like I would say no, but then it's not true because something comes and I just feel this like I have to get it down before I forget.
See that. I don't feel that.
Okay. Okay.
I feel that about oral verbal communication.
Yeah.
Like I have to talk, I have to say something to someone, what poetry, sermon, whatever. Like I love that. Writing for me is a necessity. When I think about a message, what is the best way to communicate it? Maybe in this instance, it's writing. Maybe in this instance, it's so I say all that to say, so I've never been the kind of person that has a daily writing practice unless I'm on deadline. When I'm on deadline, I'm very, organized. I schedule my time and I sit, and I have a dear friend who's a writer, and she says the only way to write is with your ass in the chair. Like you have to just sit and do it and force yourself to stay there. And that really worked for me when I was writing a book. But the rest of the time, it's pure inspiration. When I feel like jotting things down, I'm a big fan of morning pages from The Artist's Way, right? Like just free thinking writing. Do you have it there?
Somewhere. Julia is somewhere.
Yes, Julia Cameron.
Me. I can see her. Yeah.
So I wish I had like a consistent writing practice for my life, but I have one for when I'm working on a specific project, and the rest is kind of freestyle.
Yeah.
What about you?
Yeah, I would say it's pretty chaotic too. I mean, I think for me, um, there's this really wonderful TED Talk by Elizabeth Gilbert on creativity. She talks about these different poets and musicians who describe, there's one poet who describes like the poem descending while she was in the fields and having to catch it by the tail and writing it backwards. And I've never had that, but I do think at all. But like I have the main thing I do, if I have any sort of practice, it's this. When the moment comes, if I can, I clear a little space to like follow the fun flow of it. Another thing, Ray Bradbury once said he likes to write while the skin's still on it, while it's still fresh. And this idea of like write when it's an adventure. And so like I do write a lot of my first drafts on my freaking iPhone with my thumb at this, which sounds cuckoo, but like if I'm on a run, it usually always comes to me when I'm not near my computer. And so like I note that and then I just kind of stop like really and just like follow the fun. I guess I'm saying fun because I want to harness the moment where it doesn't feel like drudgery.
Yes.
And that's where I allow like where I don't know where it's going, where I'm almost chasing the thought. And then those are usually the ones, the very few, I mean, and then the drudgery comes with editing.
I was gonna say there's always a period of drudgery though, right?
There's always, oh yeah, but that's the really fun part. That's the part I would call sacred. That's like where I honor it and ride that little slide. And then the drudgery comes with editing it, like getting it into actual human speak that people outside of my brain could understand. And then, 89% of those never see the light of day. But yeah, but I like to honor that, moment. Yeah.
I love it. So I think this might be the last question. We'll see how long it takes us to answer it. But what is next for us both? What's next for you, Lulu? So you are on your virtual book tour.
Here I am over on that side of the apartment. If there's a leaf blower, I'm on that side. um, yeah, I think that I've decided to take just like a moment, basically like 6 weeks to just
Yeah.
be here in this moment. I think writing this book has been a long journey. And even though the tour isn't happening, I've kind of decided to still, I kind of want to just take some time to have input. Um,
Yeah.
and read other work and listen, and that's like what I've been craving so deeply, just to not have the output need. And then I'm kind of I'm feeling the hunger for radio and to being part of a team. I think it's been many years of like this kind of in between writing the book and freelancing and contributing. um but yeah, for me, I think it's like a return to a team, and I'm figuring out like what exactly that looks like right now. But that is my calling. That feels like the true calling voice, is just like radio and team, like
Yeah, it's what's calling you.
chatting and the messiness of life, because that's what I missed in writing the book, where everything is so manicured at a certain point that like one of my favorite parts of audio, and just like even that, it's just conversation, is the weird things that happen. So
Yeah.
that's my calling. That's the calling. I don't know the exact vision.
Yes, I love that. The
Yeah.
uncertainty is there. So I'd say the same for me. Mine's uncertainty. I've got some projects lined up. So the call I put on hold before I finished writing the book, and then going on book tour and doing all of that. But I'm missing these consistent conversations. I do a lot of hosting, moderating, facilitating, all that, but I miss just kind of having my space, inviting someone in and really doing this. So I want to relaunch, whether it's relaunching the call. All 4 seasons are still up, but I might relaunch, revamp, do something else. But I definitely want to kind of get back into that space. And maybe
Who-
another,
oh, sorry, go on, or what?
maybe another book. We'll see.
Okay. Who would be like who's like a dream guest on the show? Like, who do you just want to talk to so bad and pick her brain?
Who is a dream guest for the call? This is gonna be.
Sorry, that was like overly putting on you this on the spot. I mean, no, just you probably have so many.
I know that's the thing. There are too many names running through my head. So I have like a fun one, and then some writers. So okay, so
Wait,
I'm not writers aren't fun.
I've got a fun one, and then some, and then a like
No, but like very serious writers.
yeah.
But the fun one is Queen Latifah.
Yes.
I just think she is dope and does not get enough credit for being a pioneer, not just as an artist, but people don't know about her behind the scenes work. She built a label. She, this Black feminist in a moment when that wasn't really what was popularized. She's had this incredibly long career, has done a lot of charity work. There's just so much fun stuff to talk to her about.
Have you ever reached out? Oh my God. Okay.
Maybe that'll be next. I'll send an email.
That is how to kick off season 4.
Yes, it is. It is. I would so love to talk to her.
That'd be amazing.
She'd be amazing. And then just anyone who's written any of my like favorite recent reads. There's also this woman I love, a young woman. I say that, I mean, I'm an old millennial. She's maybe Gen Y, but also maybe Z. I don't know. But her name is Alex Wolf, and she's a tech philosopher. And so she writes and thinks in these really interesting ways about technology and how we use it. This young Black woman from the Bronx. Like, I love finding people that the world doesn't know, but have these incredible stories and insight.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Okay, I'm gonna what's the word? Do the secret on Queen Latifah.
Do it, please. I need to make that happen. All right. I think. Oh, we do have. Okay. Let me look at the time and make sure we've got time for one. Yeah, we've got time for one more question. I'll do it because I think this is a really beautiful one. What was the most significant encouragement you've ever received, and how do you encourage and handle self-doubt? Those are kind of 3 embedded in one. So answer them however you like. But the most significant encouragement you've ever received.
God, the one that just jumped to my brain is like, it was not the original or rare, but it was my mom, like in the midst of utter wreckage and doubt and all that period where I was talking about earlier. I'm just feeling like I felt like a bad person. I didn't feel like what I was doing was going to work. And just her on the phone, I remember this, like I was on my porch in Virginia. It was dark out and the world felt dark. And and you know it's your mom. Like, you know that this is subjective opinion, but it was in such a vulnerable moment. And she was just like, sweetie, you're fine. And she shared some of like some messes she has made that I never knew about. And there was this giant, just like, we all make messes and it all is often fine. And like, it was just the warmest hug that I needed. And like, I don't always go to her for that, but it came and it was like really profound. Like, it was the warm steam hug through the phone that was just like, like, life is short and live it how you want. And you can make a mess and not be irrevocably bad or irrevocably a failure. And that really buoyed me.
It's funny because sometimes you'd think, encouragement that comes from your loved ones is biased, but I've often found, that's sometimes it's the one that it hits you right in the heart, exactly where and when you need it.
Yeah.
They know you and they can like speak to you in the way that you need to be spoken to.
Yeah. And then in giving encouragement to others is like, like, I think sprinkling the seed on what's weird in them, like, just drawing out. I think like the art of conversational tending and being with someone, like basic improv comedy rules. Yes, and like, hear what someone has to say and take it there, and just which isn't to say like encourage every idea, but help draw it out. And that gift, again, that's a gift I've been given at times where like no one was interested in what I was doing, and just having a friend engage in conversation with me about my weird idea about a fish scientist, like, to give a person, to help draw out why someone cares about something.
Yeah.
That's how I try to give it back. And it's fun to hear like what random things people are passionate about.
Yeah.
Yeah, what about you?
Best encouragement was from my sister. So similarly, like going through a tough time, and she knows that one of the things I struggled with was perfectionism. And so I didn't even hear how profound it sounded, but I casually said like, oh, I wasn't my best self, and she just, without even missing a beat, she was like, the real you is the best you. And I was like, maybe I was PMSing, I don't know, but it made me cry. And
the real one, like the clumsy one, making the missteps, like that. Oh, that's beautiful.
And so I think about that all the time, that we have this idea of there's our real self and then our best self, popularized by Oprah, your best self, right? We love the phrase. But what would it mean if who you really are is your best self, and that showing up as that person with flaws and beauty and all of that is the best thing and the best version of you?
Oh, older or younger sister?
Younger. She's my little baby. We're 7 years apart.
She saw it. She knew.
She always knows. And then how do I encourage? I tend to make someone feel like they're not alone and they're not crazy.
Yeah.
Like whatever. So it's very similar to the yes and, like, wherever you are, yes, got it. Totally normal, totally fine. You're still a queen. It is fine. You know what I mean? Because a lot of times when we're struggling, it's compounded by this idea that we're weird or we're alone or we have made a bigger mess than anyone else has ever made. And so just reminding people that no, this is totally a part of life.
Yeah.
That's always my go-to.
And it's such a real gift. Like, that's the stuff I think those are some of the moments that like help us stay tethered and okay. And like, it can sound so simple or trite, but it's like, that stuff matters.
It really, really does.
Yeah.
Of course, there's an ambulance going.
There's an ambulance. Yeah, bless.
Okay, so I think I'm gonna go ahead and wrap up now, because some of the other questions are a little too big to cover in our last couple of minutes.
Right. Concise is not our strong point, but we anyway.
But it makes a great conversation. So first, let me say thank you to you, Lulu. This was such a fun way to spend my Wednesday afternoon and Wednesday evening.
It was really good. It was really fun. I honestly dread Zoom because of like the awkwardness. Being here with you made it like really nice.
This was so great. So hold up the book.
Oh, hold up the book.
Hold up the book.
Support
Only
authors.
Yes.
Oh, and it has pictures. That's maybe a fun thing to share, that there helps it go down a little faster. Really beautiful. Each chapter gets a drawing.
It's a meaningful, inspiring, but also entertaining read. So first of all, thank you for writing it. Thank you for talking to us about it. Everyone who's watching, thank you for spending your time with us. KPCC and LAist, thank you for having us and just hosting this fun, relaxing, and hopefully thought-provoking space. I know that they have many more events just like this that are coming up. So please continue to support them, your authors, your friends, everyone in this moment, and we will see you soon. Thank you.
Thanks so much.